This is Blue Grit Radio, a podcast where we talk about lessons learned for and from first responders. It's a project that's all about making better cops and a better community, where we dive into topics such as health and wellness, mindset, leadership, family, and life itself. So here on the podcast, we talk a lot about careers. We talk a lot about leadership, how that can be informed by experiences, and leadership can certainly happen at all levels. It can happen at the line level, whether that's officers, detectives, whether you are an entry-level firefighter, or whatever career it may be. Oftentimes, I find that leadership at the ground, boots on the ground level is the most impactful. Right, you are the most representatives out in any organization are the people doing the everyday work. Now, when we talk about leadership, the conversation can certainly change when we ascend in rank, when we ascend in official roles and responsibilities. Oftentimes, people are credited to have better leadership skills when they have a lot of experience to draw from. And being younger than some of your peers in a certain role can certainly be a perceived weakness or a perceived detriment. But I like to think of it as a toggle switch. It's not so much you need only experience, but you need insight, you need conviction, you need vision. Oftentimes experience can inform that and influence that and give you a better basis from that, but it's not the end all be all. We all certainly can think of a lot of people with a lot of time on and experience in whatever realm it is that they do, whether it's their profession or their passion, their hobbies, but experience isn't everything. Sometimes you have someone that just has it, like the it factor. They have that knack. They have that purposeful passion. They have that direction. And they have that candor, and sometimes that can seem like kind of an inherited trait. Inherited maybe, but also inherent trait that people just have. I mean, people sometimes appear like they're born to lead. My guest in this episode is Derek Sanders. He is a local sheriff. He is a young sheriff. He is the youngest sheriff. And so I don't want to make it, and when we get into the interview, I talk a little bit about this, but he's not impactful because of his youth, but he is impactful in addition to his youth. It makes him stand out, certainly. It had me catch wind of him, actually a little bit late for being so close to me in the region, but especially as someone that sometimes gets labeled, whether it's, by my experience or my age or how young I look can certainly be a factor in any career or any endeavor. I found it extremely insightful to talk with Sheriff Derek Sanders in this interview about lessons learned, his ascension into his career to be the number one cop in Thurston County, and a lot of experiences therein. So stick around and enjoy the show. All right, ladies and gents, this is Eric. Welcome back to Blue Grit Radio. Today joining me is Thurston County Sheriff, Sheriff Derek Sanders. Sir, thank you for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. So I just got to meet Sheriff Sanders recently at a Basic Law Enforcement Academy graduation in passing. He had some people graduate. Did you have multiple?
One this time.
Okay.
Yeah, we had 2 last week. We got 6 left in the academy. So, yeah we are hiring.
That's a fantastic feeling, yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that later. But, it's been really cool to learn a little bit about your story. I feel kind of out of the loop. So, as we spoke a little bit before, I learned about you just in the last month or two. And you've been sheriff since January, correct?
Yes, correct. Yep.
Okay, so we'll get into that. But I think part of your local claim to fame is you're sheriff of a large county here in Washington State. It has Olympia, the capital of Washington State. So it's not like and nothing disparaging towards the smaller counties, but this is something that has the spotlight oftentimes in our state. And so
people want to know what you have to say, and all eyes are on you in a way, right?
Yeah.
Similar to King County.
Yep. Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, Thurston County, not a small county. It's fifth largest sheriff's office in the state. So out of 39, we're the fifth largest. So yeah, it's not like, getting elected to a really small town where, maybe there isn't even anyone running for sheriff. You're just running unopposed. This was a large scale campaign for sheriff here in Thurston that I undertook. So it was a lot.
Yeah,
it was a lot.
Well, belated congratulations.
Thank you.
How's it been so far? We're about a little over a half year in.
Yeah. It's been really good. Most of it has actually been pretty predictable. You have to learn. I went from being a graveyard deputy to the sheriff, which is calendar-based work. So that was really the biggest change, is going from, before we would bid annually. So I'd know exactly what my shift was. I know when my vacation is. I know when everything is. I wasn't part of any specialty units, so I didn't have to come in on my days off other than just overtime I wanted to work. Whereas now it's like the phone is always on, the phone's always ringing. And really, I don't check my schedule more than a day in advance because it changes so often. So the night before I go to bed, I usually look at the schedule and I'm like, oh, I've got an interview tomorrow. I'll be prepared for that, and then go and do it. It's just a totally different mindset to have as opposed to shift work that I was used to for 7 years as a deputy.
Yeah, you're at the behest of the people.
Yes, yeah, and so it's one of those things where it's odd. Sometimes it gets out of control busy, and I'm like last week I was exhausted. But then this week, I've actually got a couple days where there's nothing really scheduled, so I actually get to kind of catch up on some things that I've been wanting to do. So just kind of a strange thing, almost kind of like patrol work, right? Some days you come in, you're like, wow, there's nothing going on. And other days, you're like, I'm underpaid.
Yeah, you're slammed. You don't have enough hours in the day, and
can't eat.
I can see it.
No lunch, right? And you're just like, wow. So same concept, just a different role.
Yeah. Very cool. So reading a little bit about you, I know you come from a law enforcement family. It's very common in this show where we ask, what brought you to law enforcement? I know that it's something that goes farther back in your life as far as a desire.
Yeah. Dad was a corrections deputy for a little bit. My mom was a dispatcher. She was actually my dispatcher as a deputy. So yeah, a little bit of law enforcement in there. She's the one who convinced me to get my career kick-started off with Lacey Police Department as a cadet. Went in there at 19 years old, didn't even know what the job was, had no idea. But I smiled through the whole interview and they hired me.
That's fantastic.
And it was it was a blessing, right? Because I didn't know what I wanted. Right? Law enforcement was always interesting, but to actually get hired on at Lacey, and then they threw me in a squad car and they're like, go transport for the officers and do parking complaints and stuff. And I'm like, this is the career that I want. So it really kickstarted me at that point into understanding what I wanted to do.
That's so cool. So I talk a lot about hiring and interviews, and I love that you just said you smiled through the thing and you did well.
Oh, I did terrible, but I smiled.
Oh,
I did terrible.
Okay.
I went in at 19 years old and, didn't know what the job was, just knew that it was something to do with Lacey Police Department. I didn't even know what a cadet was. I wasn't an explorer or anything like that. So coming in and, the people next to me, I want to say there were over 50 people on the list who applied for one position. I came in wearing a polo, not tucked in with some jeans, and everyone next to me is wearing tuxedo, full on suits. And I'm like, wow, I am out of my league here. But I smiled. I ended up getting ranked, on their list 6 out of 50 or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, it was a good run, and then I found out that every person in front of me and every person behind me failed the background. So I was the only person on that list who even made it through the background phase. So got hired on, but again, I smiled through the whole interview. And, they're like, so tell us about what you know about the job. And, I'm like, honestly, I don't really know much. Can you guys tell me? And so they did. And, I can tell they're docking me down on that kind of stuff. But, we kind of had fun and showed a little bit of dry humor, right, through the process. And going back, I remember talking to my commander and he's like, man, you did a terrible job, but you smiled and you were personable. And that stuck with me moving forward because that's what I looked for when I was a deputy and I was out recruiting other deputies, and I was the one who was taking people on ride-alongs. I didn't care if they didn't know, about how to shoot, how to drive, how to handcuff people. We teach you those things. What I want to know is, can you maintain a conversation? Do you just sit in the car and stare out the window? The interpersonal skills are the stuff that are really difficult. And you probably know this, it's hard to teach people stuff like that on FTO. FTO is for teaching you how to handle the call. It's not to teach you how to talk to people.
Right.
We're looking for that experience ahead of time. So,
yeah, I love that. It's not, you can't teach someone how to care. You can't teach them how to engage or have a good attitude generally. Like it's like pulling teeth if you can even fake it.
Correct.
Those
are the traits we need you to come with.
Yeah, but that's the thing is, I tell the story sometimes where, I came into police oral boards and I was robotic. I was trying to, I even buzzed my head. I was trying to look as military, whatever that even meant, not knowing what military lifestyle or paramilitary work was like.
Right.
It was the first interview that I did where I was actually relaxed because, to be honest, I wasn't super excited about working for that department. I didn't really know a lot about it, but I did a quick research. I went in and I was myself, right? So I love that you said a little bit of dry humor, and then the board was able to connect and say, hey, this is a good kid that's engaged and has a positive attitude. I venture to guess that if you weren't smiling and you weren't yourself, you probably would have failed.
Right. Entirely. I probably wouldn't even made the list. And I love that you said that too, right? Because so many of our new recruits, they come in and they ask me and they're like, what do I need to say here? And what I try to tell people is like, you need to focus less on what you think other people want to hear and instead be yourself, give honest answers, and accept the fact that if your honest self doesn't make the cut, then maybe the profession isn't right for you, right? Sure. Maybe that is truly the answer, right? But as long as you're yourself, I think most people have a pretty good shot at making it into the profession, because we try to weed people out who we think are being deceptive and aren't being themselves. So just go out there, be yourself, enjoy it, be professional, but people need to focus less on trying to be what others want them to be, and instead allow people to truly grade you. You're gonna probably get a better score anyways.
Yeah, I think there's a piece there connected to ego and humility, right? If you show up as your authentic self, sure, you can do some polishing, a little practice. Everyone can stand to get a little bit better about public speaking or interviewing or knowing the department. But when you go into it, if you show up as someone that's not you, you're going to be exposed and you're not going to be able to receive feedback well, right? And
we will pick you apart if we think that you're just trying to tell us what you think we want to hear. We pick people apart for that, and we fail them. Right? I mean, you need to give us the honesty. It's kind of the same thing as going through the background, right, with the polygraph. The one thing we tell people is there's a really good chance that what you've done is not disqualifying. But if you lie about it, it's automatic. It's the same concept. Be honest. Let us actually grade you and evaluate you as a person. That's your best shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And just even from, different departments across, we're 2 counties apart, but the basic things that you need are, you need to have the heart to serve. You need to have values. You need to have integrity. We've all made mistakes, and some departments are going to be more open-minded towards those than others. So the last thing you want to do is omit or curb your information so that you essentially get blackballed from the whole profession.
Exactly it.
If you get caught lying.
That's exactly it.
This might be the thing you want more than anything in the world, but maybe you apply to one other agency a year or 2 from now, and they're going to give you a shot. So why throw it all away?
Listen, in my process, I was a community service officer, so I felt like I had a genuine leg up on most people. I knew how to talk on a radio. I knew how to handcuff. I knew how to book people into the jail. I had almost 2 years of experience doing that, and I'm applying with a ton of different agencies. I really wanted to get hired on with Auburn. I really wanted to get hired on really in any of the local agencies, Olympia, Tumwater, Lacey, and I think a lot of people look at police officers and like, oh, this guy got on his first try, and I'm on my 3rd or 4th. None of those agencies hired me. None of them. I worked for Lacey and sat on their list at number 1, and they let me expire. Okay. I applied with Tumwater. They're like, sorry, we're not hiring right now. We're full. I applied with Auburn. Auburn disqualified me because I got a parking issue. I had a parking violation in my file. But I was honest about it. I was like, yeah, I did do that. I parked there, and that's what happened. And they DQ'd me for it. And I was really bummed out because I really wanted to work for Auburn. In hindsight, if I worked for Auburn, I wouldn't be the sheriff of Thurston County today. So Olympia, I got DQ'd. I didn't even pass their oral board. They failed me during the oral board. And I remember being like, wow, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. But then the second time around, I actually went and sought out a mentor at Lacey Police Department, and he worked with me like once a month we met, and we would go over things like oral boards, interviews, how do you prepare yourself, community service, all these different things. And I could feel myself not only getting a little more polished, but actually maturing. And then I realized, had Olympia hired me that time at 21 years old, I might have been fired for something immature later on. It was that extra year that gave me a little bit more maturity. And then Thurston County Sheriff's Office hired me at 21 and almost 22. And that is where home was for me. That's where I finally was like, yeah, I'm mature enough to do this job. I've been through a little bit of trials. I've shown a little, perseverance, and I'm ready for this now. So it's really easy to get discouraged when you're trying to get on with the police department.
Yeah, I love that. We need people that have faced some adversity, and that's a very common theme for an oral board. Is literally, hey, tell us about a challenging time, or work or in your personal life. We need people that are resilient, that have demonstrated that you're not just going to take your ball and go home.
Correct.
Or woe is me. That might be a good time to transition. I had full intent to talk about leadership in your career.
Yeah.
But I was reading a little bit, and some of the statements you just made about, and this is not political, folks, so those listening in, like about the law changes in Washington State. But I loved how your kind of theme was like, hey, we can poo-poo, and we can mope, and we can complain, or we can just do our best, and we can be part of the solution. And so I love that, because ultimately you're right. Whether it's you as a sheriff or me as a sergeant, when we were all reading the new law changes, it took a lot of kind of mental shifting. But when I was able to get my crew into, hey, we don't make the rules, guys. We got to play by them. How do we play the safest, best way for the citizens who are the real victims, not us?
Yep.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about that and where you come from?
Yeah. Well, so as a deputy, and sheriff's offices, as we all know, are a little bit different than city PDs. Sheriff's offices were hit pretty hard by the pursuit laws, because I think sheriff's offices did more pursuing because it was safer. There was less risk for a sheriff's office to pursue someone down a county road at 2 a.m. than even a city road at 2 a.m. Right? You got no pedestrians. Your victims are going to be trees most likely. And so it hit me pretty hard. Seeing the law changes, I was the deputy who was out chasing cars every night. Like, yeah, I did my job. I handled all the other stuff. But really, I wanted to find the domestic violence suspect on the run. I wanted to find that stolen car that was just taken. And I wanted to go capture those people, get people their stuff back, and put these guys before court. It hit me pretty hard. But what hit me harder than anything, I think, looking back, was, man, it is so important how the administration reacts to these law changes, right? And when it feels like your leader has given up, all the troops around you will also give up. There will be very few people standing. You'll have a couple people, and then what you'll see is even the ones who do, try to rally their own guys, eventually, if they're not seeing it from the top, they'll burn out too. So that's what I felt we experienced. The laws changed, and as an agency, we pretty much decided collectively that we were going to give up. This is what people voted for, so who cares? And I think looking in hindsight now, and especially what I'm trying to do as sheriff, in times of low morale, the general may have to go to the front lines a little bit and rally the troops. You look back, I just listened through a nice long speech of General Mattis, former Secretary of Defense, and he references George Washington probably 4 or 5 times during his speech. And it all has to do with George Washington as a general back in the day, leading the troops and really pulling them through tough times when a lot of people want to quit. Right now, it is tough in Washington State to be a police officer or a deputy sheriff. There's no doubt about it. And it's going to take sheriffs, police chiefs, command staff. We've got to be the dealers of hope, right? That change is coming, or if it doesn't, we're still going to push forward and do our best for our community. And that's really been maybe the biggest thing that I've tried to do in the last 7 months is deal some hope to people, both our employees and the community, that we're going to put our best foot forward, regardless of what happens that's out of our control at the legislative or federal level, that we're always going to do our best.
Yeah, I love that. I just feel like it's so sad to recognize, but across every department in the nation, there are plenty of cops that took on that victim mentality with whatever the thing was, whether it was public scrutiny, whether it was social media stuff. whether it was their staffing being depleted. Oh, no one wants to do this job. And they keep continuing this narrative. It's like, well, with people like you saying that kind of thing, then not a lot of people are going to want to do it around your circles. But I don't know how many people I've talked to as a recruiter that said that they had a police mentor at XYZ department that said, hey, man, I wouldn't do this job. And so what did they do? They shopped around to a different department to talk to someone else with a different tone and me to say, yeah, it's not all pretty sunshine and rainbows. I knew that when I signed up, and every cop that ever signed up has known that. So if you're into it and you're not afraid and you want to talk about it and talk about all the awesome things you can do to help people, then let's go.
Yep. And I was one of them, right? I mean, when the laws changed, I was poopy. I was like, this is dumb. What are we doing? And you know what? I refused to pull a car over. I did not pull a car over. I did no traffic stops for probably 6 months. And then I stopped one guy, and he had a DOC escape felony warrant, and he fled. He T-boned a car with a baby and got on I-5 the backwards the wrong way. And that just like solidified my, what am I doing? Why am I here? And, you know, it took a lot of good leaders at the first line supervisor level to pull us out of that, to get us to a point where we're like, okay, you know, we had our pouting phase. This is it now, right? We don't have a choice. We've got to move forward. And then, that whole pursuit law is responsible for me running for sheriff. That's how this whole thing got started. I got into an argument, basically with our administration over our pursuit policy, because our policy was more strict than state law was, because it was kind of we picked our ball up and we went home kind of thing. And so that sparked this argument basically of like, why are we giving up? And that turned into, well, if you think you can do better than me, then run for sheriff. And so I was like, well, why not? I have nothing better to do. I have a lot of free time. And so the rest is kind of history.
Okay, you no free time now.
No free time now. It is very busy, but I'm having a lot of fun. So
yeah, Sheriff. Well, let me ask you this: has that always been your personality? Like someone throws a challenge at you, kind of like here, like, hey, you think you can do better? And you're like, yeah, I kind of think I can.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll be honest with myself, right? I do have a little chip on my shoulder, right? I think I've been through some tough stuff as a kid, in my early years, and so I kind of have this mentality that no matter what I face, the worst is already behind me. Whatever it is, like it all is going to seem like a cakewalk. That's how I kind of approach things, compared to what I went through. But yeah, what I'll do, right, if someone challenges me. Now, see, if LeBron James came down and was like, what's up? You think you can beat me in one-on-one? I'll do it, but I already know, like, there's a really low chance of success. But yeah, when people throw stuff at me and they're like, well, if you think you can do better, if I do, then a little competitive then. Okay, yeah, let's see. Let's see who's better. So yeah, I have to be realistic with myself. I won't just take any challenge to the end of the moon. But I'll certainly throw my name in the hat. I'm not afraid to get dirty and get down there and work for stuff and compete.
Yeah. Well, I think that speaks really well to your leadership style, which is to be yourself and be your honest self. I appreciate that you have this transparency to share, hey, I was down in the dumps with the pursuit law, and no one is impervious to, we're not machines, and that's kind of the point. That's what makes us so great at what we do is we're going to be affected by these things we can't control. And so just to admit that and say, hey, yeah, I'm not going to be rah cheerleader, like the job's awesome every single day, but you're going to circle the wagons and you're going to regroup and say, okay, now it's time to, we're kind of refreshed, hit that button, and then let's figure out how we can do this a different, better way.
Well, we certainly, that's kind of the cool thing. I got elected. Now I am the leader of my own destiny, right? I get to control it to some extent. And so we changed our pursuit policy. We pursue for DUI. We pursue for anything the state allows us to. We changed our definitions of what trailing a vehicle is, right? A lot of people, they'll only run for the first 30 seconds. So if our deputies can still maintain a visual, they're allowed to do that. The old policy said turn around, go the other direction. We try to spike cars. We try to call for air support. Our deputies are out there, and you've seen this rejuvenation amongst our patrol deputies. They're out there hammering it. They are hammering it. They are looking for intoxicated drivers. They are trying to spike stolen cars. They're trying to trail vehicles. They're trying to get people their stuff back. And to me, it's really exciting to see. But again, I try to go out there and also be with them through it, right? I know a lot of our deputies were super nervous about chasing a DUI because it's kind of subjective. What is a what is reasonable suspicion for a DUI?
Right. Yeah.
4 days into my gig as sheriff, I chased one. And it kind of gave them this like, oh, well, I mean, it is okay, right? I mean, here's some of the things he observed, a wrong way driver, that kind of stuff, and we can go after these guys. So, yeah, I think it's just important. You know, people are pretty hesitant with the changes, but they started catching on, and our deputies have done a good job of not abusing that, right? And they're not just calling everything a DUI. They're really looking for the articulable facts and circumstances to get behind those cars and pursue them. So, yeah, no complaints from me.
Yeah, that's huge. I'm hearing a very lead from the front mentality. Where do you think you got that from? Or is that something that's always been a theme that's resonated with you, especially as you cite historical figures and figures like Mattis citing Washington?
Yeah. I think for me, it's a sense of hypocrisy. I do not like hypocrisy. I have a strong resentment towards hypocrisy. You know, the do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. You know, I never liked, you know, the idea that my police chief would send me to something I know that they would never do. They would never want to do. So when I ran for sheriff, one of the things I kept hitting on through all my campaign talking events was like, I'm not going to send my deputies anywhere that I won't go myself. So if we got to do this new thing that sucks, I'm going to go learn how to do it too. And I'm going to participate in that. Right. Whether it's a new training or, you know, whatever it is, that I'm going to go through that as well. So I just hate hypocrisy. I don't like it when it just seems like, oh, it's good to be king, right? And the second thing is Sheriff Fortney up in Snohomish County. I kind of trailed his path a little bit. He blazed it initially, at least recently. And so watching him take on his incumbent boss and then beat him and then go out and be really involved in the community, he'll throw spikes down, you know, he'll get involved in some pursuits and stuff here and there. I've taken it a little bit further, I think, since last night I was out till 2 a.m. in a foot chase with a burglary suspect. So I've taken it a little bit further, I think, since I actually throw a body cam on and I'm regularly going out on patrol. But there's a lot of people that came before me that have really blazed a pretty clear path for me. So I'm hoping that I can blaze the path for someone else.
Yeah. Is that a challenge balancing that? You know, you have this very street cop in you. You clearly this desire and this passion, and then to balance all your administrative and now kind of big scale duties.
Yeah, kind of. There's a lot of risk in it, right? So there's a ton of risk in doing it. But for me, it's almost one of those things where the people who play it safe their entire life, that's cool. That's a personal choice, but I'd rather take a risk and be great than, you know, play it safe and be okay. So I'm okay with taking some of those risks and doing some of that stuff. But the other part of it too is that I've got a very, very, very good administration. And I picked them very carefully for the positions that they're in. But one of the things that we've got going on that's pretty good is I've got an undersheriff that likes to do more of the desk work. And then as the sheriff, I like doing more of the community involvement and going out and doing patrol work and kind of leading from the front kind of thing. So it's pretty funny, you know, we kind of have that yin and yang going on. He likes doing a lot more of the meetings and a lot more of the desk paperwork stuff. I like being out there active. So it's a good team, I think.
Yeah, he take the budgets?
Yeah, we all do budget stuff.
Okay.
Just because, you know, very few people know, but if I go over budget as the sheriff, I'm personally liable for every dollar. And as you can see, you know, I don't make that much money. I make good money, but not that good money. Like if we go over a couple $100,000,
yeah, let's avoid that.
I still, you know, it's not that I have trust issues, but I like to be very involved in the budget, and I get weekly updates from my chief of finance about how we're looking and that kind of thing. So
yeah, what's that quote? It's trust but verify.
Trust but verify. Yeah, but I have a really good team. And I know
on.
my chief of finances, she's incredible. So
it's fantastic. Are any of your team like, hey, sheriff, awesome, but are you sure you want to be going out on that? Are you sure you want to be foot pursuing? You get any of that kind of opinion kind of filtering in?
Not really, not internally. I think people know that. Listen, I'm really open to listening and stuff, but I pretty much made my mind up on this one that I'm going to keep doing it. And you know, I'm careful, right? Like I know that if I get hurt or if I get killed, that it's going to be not good for the department. But again, I'm willing to take some risk when I see the reward of what it brings for the community, what it brings to morale amongst the deputies and stuff like that. But I always have to remember that they're the ones who are out there doing it every single night, low staffed. handling the calls and stuff like that. So really, it's more of an honor to get to go continue to serve alongside them and just kind of monitor all the good work they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. A conversation I've had a number of times, especially with younger candidates and myself and yourself now, I'm finding hired on young, right? Like 21, 22 coming to the job. You do catch a certain amount of scrutiny just being a quote unquote kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Coming into this job, especially, I mean, even from the public, right?
Yeah.
You're going to go into a middle-aged household, domestic issues, and you're going to try to kind of counsel them or mediate that through. It's like, what do you know about relational issues? What do you know about life, son? Right?
Nothing.
Yeah. Have you encountered that especially at this heightened level?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and when I ran for office, that was probably the number one topic, right? Was experience and age throughout the entire campaign. And, it just got hammered over and over and over again. It was like, yeah, he's smart. Yeah, maybe he's a decent cop, but he's so young. What does he know about running a department? What does he know about this? And it kind of goes back to the other stuff, right? Those are things you can learn. And that was my biggest focus in my campaign. It's like, listen, I can learn about the budget. And guess what? In 1 week, my chief of finance was able to bring me up to speed about how the budget works, where money can be pulled from, where it can't be pulled from. Like you don't have to be a math whiz either. You're just understanding a concept of budget finance. You don't have to get deep into it. That's her job.
Trust your people, right?
Yeah, trust your people, right? It's a $50 million budget. Oh my gosh. And guess what? There's a whole bureau of people within the department whose only job is to make sure that money is allocated lawfully and to drive our goals. So, a lot gets caught up in the sheriff position because out of all the local positions, I think that there's a lot of people want to know what the sheriff is doing and that kind of stuff. But the reality is that it's our team. It's not just me. Like, this isn't a one-man show. Sure, maybe I set the mission, vision, and values, but those can be set by a young person. What does that have to do with anything? I don't think age and morale, or a moral compass have any. They're kind of irrelevant. There's good people through all the different age spectrums. So I got it a lot. Too young, immature, whatever it is, and so I basically on the other end, I just used my age as a weapon. Then I turned around and used it as a weapon, right? And basically showed how much more active, how much more energy I had. And so that's, I think, the big thing to take away from it, right, is that people are always going to have a comment about your age or your gender or your race or whatever it is. But I weaponized mine. Right. Biracial, young, tons of energy, and just enough experience to understand the job. The rest can be taught. Yeah.
I love that. And maybe even weaponized or like a spur in yourself, right? Like a motivator, a little chip on your shoulder. Never hurts.
Yeah, and my energy, right? Like that was the big thing. Is every morning I got up to campaign. I work graveyard, so I'd get off at 5 a.m, assuming I didn't have to hold over, and then at 9 a.m, I would get up and go campaign every day until 5 p.m. when I came home, ate dinner for the first time that day, first meal of the day, and then I would go work graveyard for 10.7 hours and do it over and over and over again. I did that for 8 months, but I kept reminding myself that your opponent's probably not doing this. Probably isn't, right? Because the energy is there. My youth was the best attribute I had in the race. And I think it's the best attribute that a lot of people have when they go on to become police officers. Your energy, a fresh outlook, a different generation. The reality is that when you look at police officers, and this is just my opinion, when you look at police officers, it's our young police officers, the ones who are 21, 22, 25. Those are the ones who are most in touch with our community about future needs and kind of the future of our policing and how the community wants to go. The people who are getting ready to retire, right, they've been doing this for a really long time. And the reality is a lot of them are counting down the days to retirement. It's our youth. It's the young people who are most in tune with what the community is wanting in their police department or the sheriff's office.
Yeah, I love that, sir, because so much of it is just a recognition that you have a lot of strengths with all the perceived weaknesses. Like people are labeling something as a weakness. You're like, no, that's an absolute strength, right?
100%.
I just think about working graveyard with 2 years on, how much more resilient my body and my mind was to doing that crazy lifestyle than it was when I went back to Graves, a handful of years later. And when I went back to Graves, 2 years ago, I did Graves voluntarily, trying to lead from the front with my guys that, we were switching up the shift, the whole workup and the schedule. And some guys were like, man, I don't want to go to Graves. I was like, let's all go back together.
Let's go back
quickly. Yeah. I'll be honest. My wife makes fun of me. She was making fun of me. She's like, you're not handling this well at all. Do you regret it? I'm like, I'm okay. I'll get through it.
Right. I'll tell you what, after being on a day shift schedule, night shift is like, oh my gosh. Like at 2 a.m. this morning, I was like, I got to go to bed. I got to go to bed. But you're right. There's a lot of strength in all that stuff. But we need people like you who are leading and be like, you know what? Maybe this does suck, but let's all go through it together kind of thing. Right. And that's the camaraderie that I think the military and fire service and police service all kind of has in common, right? Is like, you're right, it's not all rainbows, and sometimes it's going to suck, but we're going to go through the suck together, and we're going to make memories, and we're going to bond over it.
Yeah, I love that. And even to rewind a little bit, I loved how basically what you said reminds me of what I try to remind some recruits is that, hey, you know why you're here. You know the work you put in and what you want to do with it. Now you got to prove it. Yep. And so you let your work speak for itself. You let your work silence your critics, and then you can just sit back and say, yeah, I told you so.
Yeah. And it was true as a deputy for me. It was true as a community service officer with Lacey. And it's never been more true as the sheriff, right? I mean, politically speaking, my race was very, very straightforward. Everyone perceived me as a Democrat, and everyone perceived my opponent as a Republican, even though we both ran as independent. And there were a lot of people. My favorite thing to hear, more than anything, out of everything I've heard over the last 7 months is, I didn't vote for you, but good work. Right? It's more of a, like, we're all in this together, but I just kind of put my nose down and went to work and letting that kind of speak for itself. And that kind of method, that mindset is applicable no matter what you do in life. But it's kind of where I'm at in this sheriff position, right? Is like, we're going to get to work. And if you like it, you like it. And if you don't, well, what can we do to improve?
I think those anecdotes are even more powerful, right? Because it's like, hey, I didn't vote for you, but good job. Like, you've won them over, right? By virtue of your work and what you're doing and what they see, what you're saying, how you're leading.
Yep. A lot of people had a ton of questions, right? And I don't blame them. Change is scary. People in law enforcement don't like change. They also hate nothing changing. They hate both. Of course, yeah. Adage, the two things they hate: change and nothing changing. But it's scary, and like, personally looking back on it, like, yeah, like, it is kind of a little scary to hand the keys of a county to a 28-year-old sheriff, 29-year-old sheriff, whatever. And that's a little scary. You're kind of taking a plunge, and aside from the possibility of being recalled, you're stuck with me for 4 years. So you gotta vote me out next time if you don't like it. So it's a scary plunge, but again, I wanted to convince people to vote based on character and potential and all these other things, and not just focus on the age. The age is such a small portion of it.
Well, it worked. Were there roles and assignments that you had envisioned early in your career that you wanted to do that you were kind of wondering, man, am I going to have an opportunity to work that now that I'm going all the way to the top?
Yeah, I passed everything. I didn't, I never became SWAT operator, never did K9, never did FTO. It's funny. They finally asked me, "Hey, do you want to do FTO?" But it was right when I was getting ready to announce my campaign. So I'm like, "Man, I can't train people and campaign. It's not fair to the recruits. I'm gonna be." Absolutely. My mind was in so many other directions, and I was so tired all the time that it wasn't gonna be fair to them. But yeah, there's a lot of things that my career, assuming that I keep going down this path, that I'll have never done, and that's the trade-off, right? I mean, you get to be the youngest sheriff in state history, which is kind of cool. The caveat to that is you'll be the youngest sheriff who didn't do any specialty work or specialty assignments. But the cool part is that the sheriff, I can kind of interject myself into all of those. I'll never be the FTO, but I get to oversee the FTO program in a way.
Absolutely.
Make sure it's what I'm expecting. I won't ever be a SWAT operator, but I'm the commander of the SWAT team. I'm the last the last top end of the SWAT team. So, give and take. I still run with the dogs. I still run with the canines. I get to
love
pet them
that.
whenever I want. Yeah. So, can't tell me anything. I get to pet the canine whenever I want.
Yeah, I loved working when a dog handler was going, and then I had another sergeant that could manage the street, and I'm like, hey, I'm
Yep.
going to run. And
I'm
we had
running.
a culture where, especially a lot of
Yep.
prior canines, sergeants would run,
Yep.
and it's so huge. But
100%. We do the
yeah,
same
for you
thing.
to go too, that's huge.
Our sergeants are go-getters, and they're like, if there's another sergeant working, they're like, I'm going to the scene. And you already know what they're doing. And I love it, right? I want to see that excitement at the sergeant level as well, because they're really the first line of defense of keeping that morale up and going. And they have friendly competitions and stuff. Who gets the most warrants. We try to do things that don't have like any possibility for people to try and throw themselves under the bus, right? Sometimes some of the competitions, who can get the most arrests. Well, we don't really want that because we don't want people going out of their way to arrest people. But warrants are things that are already in the system, right? The stuff that's objective and not subjective. So they have these little competitions, and then they'll have fitness competitions with their guys, right? We'll do the 1,000 sit-up, 1,000 push-up, 1,000 pull-up competition, and see who can get there first. So they're doing a really good job of leading from the front and keeping people engaged and healthy, even though we have a ton of vacancies and there's a ton of mandatory overtime. And our deputies have, in both the jail and patrol, have every reason to be salty and upset. And people are pulling forward anyways.
That's fantastic. What is next for you? You thought about, let me preface this by saying, I think it's pretty astounding and extremely rare that you have someone in law enforcement that says, hey, I'm going to go for this thing. I'm going to create the more exciting story, maybe, as it were. Because a lot of us in law enforcement think, hey, I don't want to promote too fast, or I'll lose traction. I won't be able to do the assignments I want. I don't want to be a chief too young, because then I'm I'm subject to someone else's decisions. But you strike me as someone that's gone for it, and you keep going for it. Have you thought about what's next?
For me, I don't know. I love patrol work so much. It's hard for me to imagine leaving this profession. It really is. And the one thing I will say is that even though things are tough and you're going to get injured and there's all these different things that come with the job, the benefits are pretty good, right? The reward at the end is pretty nice. We're very fortunate in Washington State to have a very good retirement system, and left to. And so, there is that carrot at the end of it, right? You do your time and you get to take a nice retirement. And so, my kind of thing, right, is like in law enforcement here, the cool thing about our job is that rainbow, that leprechaun at the end, we never catch it, right? Of really becoming like the pinnacle of law enforcement. So there's always something to pursue. I don't foresee myself getting bored with this. And I don't know, everyone's like, oh, you got to run for governor. You got to do this. You got to do that. That's the new one. You got to run for governor. And I don't know, like maybe things will change in the future, but just the thought of that, I have no interest in it whatsoever. I'm going to write out the sheriff thing. If people like what they're getting out of it, then I'll stay in office. If they don't, listen, I have no issue with going back and being the graveyard deputy who's looking for people that are creeping through the night. Like that's where I have my fun. It's still where I have my fun. So again, law enforcement for me it's the end goal. There's not really much else after that. So keep pushing forward. And again, here at the sheriff's office, there's so many things that we're pursuing right now, and it's going to take so much time that I feel pretty comfortable about where I am and not burning out or getting bored.
Yeah. The world is your oyster, right? You've said it earlier. Not only do you have the opportunity to dive in and supervise or interact with all these different specialties, but the needs of law enforcement are ever changing. Mm-hmm. And there's so many tiny facets that we can never hope to even gloss it all. We have subject matter experts that become one of the best in their craft, maybe in the state, but they have to focus on that one thing. They're not doing all these other, tentacles of law enforcement. So, yeah, I love reminding, I say our young, people coming into the profession, but also we need to be reminded of it in the profession as well, whether we're, mid-career or, 10 years out towards retirement. Like, there's still a lot to learn.
Yep. No, absolutely. And I'm flooded with information right now, right? I mean, it's kind of like, again, I love how much of this correlates back to just the core work of law enforcement, right? But some of the agencies around the state, for instance, for SWAT team operators, they rotate those positions out, right? So you only get to do it for 5 or 6 years, maybe. We don't, and the reason that we don't, and we make it a lifetime appointment, is two things. One, we feel that SWAT operators really start truly getting comfortable and learning how to do their job around year 4, year 5. So you be rotating people out right when they got used to understanding all the different aspects of what it means to be on the SWAT team. The second thing is that what we find is you have natural attrition anyways, right? People will get on the SWAT team and they'll do it for 5 to 10 years. And then naturally, people are ambitious. Our SWAT team operators are typically a lot of former military. They're ambitious in their own. So then they say, you know what? I want to go do boats. I want to go do canine. I want to go do this. I want to go do that. People who are looking for a complete package by the time they retire and said, I did all these things. And it's kind of the same thing here at the sheriff's office for me as the sheriff, right? Is that my term is only 4 years. But I feel like I'm probably not even going to get comfortable until about year 3 or 4 of actually understanding everything that I do, the scope of my influence, how to interact, how to do better. So it's really, different positions all the way through, whether you're a sergeant, lieutenant, commander, sheriff, deputy. But the kind of the pillars are all the same, if you will, right? It takes a little bit of time in your new role to really understand that stuff and get it down. And so, we're all going through the exact same thing. We're just in different phases. Yeah.
You've talked a lot about the sheriff's office for those that are unfamiliar. Do you have anything else that you want to share in recruiting or, to help people learn about what Thurston County has to offer?
Specifically at Thurston County, one of the things that I always found was when I was a deputy, most cops, I think, don't want people in their front seat. I think that's just a general rule. Most cops are kind of like, nah, I don't want people in my front seat. I just want to go do my job and go home. I'm trying to change that mentality. At the sheriff's office, we encourage people to go to ride-alongs. And I know some of our deputies are like, oh my God, they never do a ride-along. But the reality is that for decades, if not a century, police departments have done a horrific job of educating the public about why we do what we do. People know what we do. They know that we, for instance, draw our weapons on felony stops for stolen cars. They see that. They watch it on the news. They watch it on videos. Has anyone told them why? Has anyone told them why? And then historically, right, if someone does ask why, granted, it's usually at a really inappropriate time, like halfway through the felony stop, but people will say, hey, why's your gun out, right? What's the whole purpose of this? And historically, what have we done? It's police business, move along, mind your business. You'll read about it on the news.
Right?
Yeah, we get defensive over it. When I was a deputy, I can remember one time where I'm on a felony stop, and someone's yelling and screaming, and they're like, why you guys, and it probably minority in the car or something like that. You guys are always doing this, pointing guns at people. And I'm like, this vehicle is using an armed carjacking. Oh. Right? Now, not a great time frame, right, for that kind of stuff. Sure. But that's why I'm trying to get people on ride-alongs. I'm trying to get them in our cars. We're trying to release our body cam and dash cam footage and stuff. We need to educate the public about why we do what we do. They understand what we do. They don't get why. And normally there's a really good reason why. And if there isn't, maybe we should change it. Just a thought, right? If we can't answer the public about why we're doing something the way we do it, then maybe we all need to get back together and say, well, then why are we doing it? If we can't come up with a good reason why, and maybe it looks bad to the public eye, to the untrained eye, then maybe we need to change. And, we've seen, I'm not a DT maestro or anything, but a lot of the Gracie defensive tactics stuff that they've been doing, I love their videos. And the reason I love their videos isn't because I'm a DT nerd, because frankly, I hate fighting people. But what I love about their videos is that they'll say, listen, there's a lot of things that you can do as a police officer that are lawful, but they look awful. The lawful but awful has got us nowhere, right? Yeah, technically you can start punching the guy in the back because he won't show you his hand underneath his belt, and maybe he's got a weapon. But Gracie will actually go through and teach you how to do something in a manner that looks acceptable to the public eye and is actually more effective than wildly punching people in the back, right? The knee drive through the back of the tricep that can actually separate the arm, and then you can scoop under it using your strong arm and pull it out, right? And it looks better, it looks more presentable, and then you get the why behind it. Here's why we do it that way.
Yeah.
That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in reshaping the perception of law enforcement. I think there's been a really unfair narrative that's gone on for decades. And historically speaking, law enforcement's just been quiet. We just kind of take it, and that's kind of it. And I don't know. I'm just interested in sharing a different perspective, one that's kind of pulled the curtains back from law enforcement and showed people what it's really like behind the scenes.
Yeah. I love that. Everything you said, I think it's a lot of what we need. I was certainly one of the cops that when people would ask scrutinizing questions with a certain tone, I got defensive, right? I was like, you don't know and you never will. You will never care to understand what I have to say. But how do I know that unless I try, right? And so I can start to explain. If they talk over me, then that's okay. Like, I'm a professional. I'm paid to do this, right? So I should be able to keep my cool and not take it so personally. I'm literally working, just like at a customer service desk. Or more likely than not, oftentimes they will stop and listen to what you're saying, or someone with them will say, hey, shut it. Like, let me hear what he has to say. We've been in those kind of even crowd control situations.
Yes. And there's nothing, as a law enforcement officer, there's nothing more dignifying and nothing better than when their own peers are telling them, hey man, back off. Like, this guy's cool. And he actually took the time to explain that. And when you see the peer intervention, that's when you know you're actually shaping culture within your own community, right? Like, because it's the same thing, you know, with drug overdoses among teens. We can come out and say whatever we want, but until their own peers are actually telling them, that's where the most powerful peer pressure, good peer pressure, is the most powerful tool that we have. Whether it's in our youth, whether it's in adults on the sides of the road on traffic stops, right? I've had a bunch of people who did the whole, you know, I'm not showing you nothing, but then the wife is in the front seat, like, you know, don't be mean. Give them your stuff. Stop this. You're acting crazy, right? And then you see okay, well, you know, wife is telling me I need to behave, right? It's the peer pressure behind it, right? When you've captivated everyone around them, that's where we truly change minds.
Yeah, I love that, and I even expand that to cops, right? We're talking about accountability, we're talking about transparency, and I think a lot of us get these state mandated trainings, right, on how to interact with people, how to effectively communicate, and people are like, I don't need this, like, or we can watch it and say, like, you probably learned something from it, right?
You may not want to admit it, but you probably learned something from the cheesy state video that you had to watch for 35 minutes. You probably did, but it's okay. Absolutely. You don't have to tell us.
Yeah, or like ABLE, right? Active bystander training. To say like, hey, do you need to step in and intervene when your partner's getting too hot? And if you didn't brand it with a thing that was a mandated training, and you just said, hey, let's talk about this thing where sometimes we get rise in emotion, especially if someone just fled from you and assaulted you. Yeah. And would it be nice for you to recognize and check yourself or your buddy to check yourself, tap you out and say, hey, actually, I'll talk to this guy. I'll read him Miranda. You can go chill in the car. Is that not a great idea?
We do it all the time, right?
And like, smart.
I love it. I love it, right? It's like, man, like, well, and it's true. I wish we treated more stuff like that, like we did with an officer-involved shooting, right? If we had an officer-involved shooting, we wouldn't have the officer who shot go interview the suspects and the witnesses, right? We pull them back. And we have people who weren't attached, who aren't even working for our department, go and interview these people because they're objective and they don't have the emotional rise out of everything, right? We don't even have the cop's buddy go interview them. I wish we had more of that going on in law enforcement as a whole. It's like, man, I can tell that like my buddy just got assaulted and he's really amped up and he's going to scream at this dude the whole time during the interview and probably get nothing out of him, right? He's probably going to clam up and not talk to us. Pull this guy out. I'll go interview him. And then the most important thing, right, is give that person who was assaulted, that deputy who was assaulted, give them a task they can go accomplish. Hey, man, can you go work on pulling your body cam footage so that we can look over it and see if there is something that we're missing, if you threw something during the foot chase, right? Give them something productive to go do so that they're not just sitting there blowing steam off in the middle of the road.
Yeah, it's hard. We take this job so personally because we do put a lot out on the line as far as our safety, as far as our convictions, and as far as, you know, just putting ourselves out there, a lot of scrutiny. So I see why it happens, but we have to remember what's the mission and what's helpful, right? Yeah. You gave the example where rambling or yelling at someone is not going to help you get a confession. So let's keep our cool and let's get that confession, right? Or let's get, you know, third officer on scene that didn't see any of this. Yeah. Let's have he or she can interview.
Yes.
Why not?
I love it.
And mission focus, right? And
I love
so
it.
I appreciate all your time, sir. I want to be
Yeah.
cognizant of your time.
Yeah, no. Appreciate you having me
do you have-
on.
Yeah. My last question.
Yeah.
What do you do to decompress? You got a big job, big hat, and I want others to recognize like you can't just work all the time.
So my election present to myself, because it was a gruel. It was running for office. I have a newfound respect for anyone who throws their name in the hat. Running for office is the hardest thing I've ever done. Hardest thing I've ever done. Run for office. Most stressful time of my life. A lot of people don't really understand everything that goes into it. You know, I just about bankrupted myself. I maxed out all my credit cards because I was donating my own, deputy salary. I was funding my own campaign for the first half of it because I didn't get much attention. So you're financially stressed. You don't have any time. You're tired. You're hungry. So by the end of it, in March, I went and bought myself a nice boat. I live out on a lake, so I spend a lot of time I spend a lot of my free time, I should say. Not that I have a whole lot out on that boat. Enjoying it with friends, family, whatnot. And then I do exercise. I play basketball. Have a lot of fun playing basketball, even though I'm not that good, just going out and hooping and get my exercise in. And then I also like working on vehicles. So I own a bunch of Mustangs and stuff, and nice. I like tinkering with them and learning how engines work and stuff like that. So definitely, as a police officer, make sure that you have hobbies that aren't related to police work. Give yourself that break. And I know a ton of cops like, firearm stuff and things like that, but find another hobby too. Because I guarantee you, when you're thinking about all your firearm stuff, you're also thinking about work. So find something that totally breaks off as best you can, because we need that separate time.
Yeah, well, I love that, Sheriff Sanders. Thank you so much for your time, especially closing on the note of, hey, if Top Cop can say wellness, spending time outdoors, in nature, fitness is an absolute priority, what better way to lead by example than, fitness, like all the things that you've been saying, leading from the front. This is a super impactful conversation. So thank you again very much for your time.
Thank you.
You're a busy man.
Appreciate you.